Thank you very much, Raffaello, for this very extended and actually well-researched, based on information, data, that gives us evidence of what is going on, irrespective of these areas having actually scanty information and also less of a surveys that could be used for analysis. I think I will now open the floor to people to ask. You can always write your questions, and I will then communicate that to Raffaello to give us his answers. I will, in the meantime, I can actually start with a question to Raffaello, which is based mainly on, and I will start with the information. As we said, this is information for action. Decision makers need information. And in his work and when they were building, he already had told us that there were problems of information. So maybe from that point, if he sheds a bit of light on the problems with regard to information and what could be done actually to enhance our knowledge, especially now with technology and all these things available, what needs to be done to have the best information and for decision makers.
I think he's okay. Okay, thanks, Shukri. Indeed, this is a major issue that, as you rightly imagined, we had to confront with during the time of preparation of the report. I would say if I have to single out one area that we found particularly striking is the whole issue of livestock and pastoralism. Although of course information exists, thanks to FAO and others and so on, it is I think it's essential to invest in really the basics, right? So much better information on the number of animals, how many animals there are, where are they, who owns them. These are some of the three key questions that should be answered with a lot more solid evidence. And I think we need to, as a development community, probably we haven't done enough of a case of persuading, let's say, decision makers and politicians in these countries that not just collecting numbers for the sake of it, but this has dramatic implication in terms of the way in which resources are used, and the dramatic implication in terms of the social stability of this country. So I think this is a simple message, probably that's not being conveyed clearly enough. We also have to be mindful of the fact that, again, just dwelling for a second on the pastoral livelihoods, the fact remains that we can't ignore that in some of these countries there are delicate social issues whereby collecting information on some of these issues might be politically charged, right? Because we know, for instance, that the ownership of animal wealth tends to be concentrated in a few hands that tend to be highly politically influential. And so that perhaps explains to some extent the challenges encountered in improving the measurement of some of these variables, particularly when an important variable is not just counting how many animals we have, but also who owns this animal, right? So that's a very important one. Now, I think I totally agree with you that there is a lot more that we can do relying on improved, let's say, technology for collecting and analyzing information. So clearly, I think that this has to be very high in the priority list of the development community in the years to come.
Thank you, Raffaello. We have actually a question that relates to social protection, especially in the area that you have already discussed when you were costing the safety nets that are there. So the question from Natalia is when you were doing the costing of the safety nets, does it include only the cash transfer, or does it have a minimum package of interventions? This would be one of the questions, but also she relates it to what dimension of coverage were considered.
Shall I pick up a few? Or?
Go ahead.
Okay, so good question on the safety nets. You will find more details in the book, and also we have a special background paper just on the social protection aspect of the work. Essentially, what we did in order to come up with a let's say manageable way to measure the problem, what we did was to essentially we came up with two measures. One was the cost of bringing all the drought-affected people up to the poverty line using information that we have from surveys carried out over time on the poverty gap, right? So the severity of poverty, and so what is the average distance from the poverty gap. And so, assuming essentially that, assuming for the sake of analysis, essentially like a perfect targeting of population, what we did was to estimate in this first measure the amount of cash outlay, as the cash transfer that had to be made available to the drought-affected population in order to bring them back to the poverty line, taking into account the poverty gap. So that was the first measure. The second one was essentially to identify a basic package that, by and large, will essentially cover only one share of the poverty gap, but that is in line with existing practices of administering safety nets in the countries. So that, I think I had one slide where there is like a bracket of outlay in safety nets, depending on whether you provide a full, let's say, filling up of the poverty gap or a partial one based on the existing packages.
Thank you, Raffaello, for that. I think our next question comes from Paolo Piaz, and he is asking us actually if Raffaello can expand a bit on the way the optimum mix of resilience building interventions in different countries have been calculated when you have the mix, to give us a little bit of a background on that.
Okay. So that suggests that people have really been listening carefully, because it's a very good and technical question. So I'm glad about that. We had a model that essentially looks at disaggregated by polygons. So as I mentioned earlier, so intersection of aridity zones and administrative units, and we looked at essentially on any given year, depending on the climate observed in the past, and so we project this climate actually to reproduce in the future. We actually assumed, although we did a few simulations, but anyways, for the main part of the analysis, we essentially assumed the same climate scenario for the future. We measure essentially the number of people for which production will fall below a certain production threshold, and therefore the number of people will be affected by drought. We then basically measured using crop models. We looked at the ability of, let's say, adopting, drought-resilient varieties, or adopting improved fertility management and so on. We looked at the ways in which that threshold could be exceeded. So in other words, that where people could actually be above, let's say, the survival threshold. And we then, we had some assumptions we had some simplified costing structure where the cost of actually adopting these technologies was reflected into the analysis and expressed into, let's say, yield equivalent, right? So if you make 100, but you have to spend, let's say 10 to adopt the technology will only make sense if you make more than 10 in terms of additional production, right? So that was the very simplified kind of cost benefit. And then we selected essentially only the technologies that in any given polygon would, number one, be able, first of all, to be able to kind of pass this very simple kind of economic feasibility test. And then we looked essentially at the, for any given polygon, the technology that would be able to make the most of the difference for the people in that polygon. And that was retained for that polygon as the technology to be considered for the future. And so, as you can imagine, as you aggregate different polygons, the mix of the technologies in every given country will be quite different from country to country.
Thank you, Raffaello. Natalia actually has a follow-up question that kind of puts especially the cost of cash transfer, and she contends that if we invest in resilience, then the cost of cash transfer will decrease. So she took this statement to say maybe this needs to be nuanced a bit, and in a way to say the cost of cash in emergencies will decrease, as investing in resilience should include investing in shock responsive systems and expanding their coverage to the poor, as well as to those vulnerable to crisis and threats. So from that nuanced point of view, Raffaello.
Yeah, that is true. I think in the book is kind of worded in the right way. Maybe I haven't worded it in my talk, but essentially, this is not necessarily the cost of running the safety net system, right? Because as Natalia rightly points out, that also should include the administrative cost or the cost of kind of making sure the system is in place. This is just measured in terms of what is the value of the cash transfer that need to be made in order to kind of meet the need of the people affected by drought on any given year. And so, the intuition is that, clearly if you have less people, you have to spend less cash. What we did, though, is to take away, we had, for lack of time, I can go back to that. I didn't elaborate on that. We did a simplified cost-benefit analysis, in which essentially we compared let's say, the savings that can be achieved by having less people affected by drought with the cost of actually, investing in, let's say, farmer-to-farmer extension, maybe providing a kind of a subsidy for encouraging the adoption of these technologies and so on. There's a lot of uncertainty and costs. So what we did was to basically run a number of scenarios of, let's say, a cost escalation factor and so on. And what we found is that the benefit cost ratio for wide range of cost escalation factors is higher than 1. Considerably higher than 1, suggesting that basically there is a strong case for investing. So the fiscal savings that you can achieve, not to run the whole safety nets program, but just to kind of the cash outlay part, well justifies the investment in kind of encouraging the adoption of these technologies.
Following that, I think Julius Jackson also is asking, based on the detailed analysis of reducing vulnerability and increasing resilience, what are your thoughts, Raffaello, on how the 3 pathways that were proposed could or would impact on the root causes and drivers of migration, instability, conflict? These are now topics that are on top of the global agenda in the region.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we looked at this issue in a bit of an indirect way, although I think there are a number of important insights that one can utilize for addressing the question. So the main way that we looked at it was in the context of livestock and pastoralist livelihoods. And again, for lack of time, I couldn't elaborate on that, but you will find the details in the not just in the book, but again, I would strongly urge those of you who are interested in reading the livestock background paper. So what the team did was to do a detailed, let's say, modeling exercise utilizing a combination of biomass balancing tools, herd modeling, and household modeling. And what they did was to basically, using the actually again FAO produced gridded map of livestock of Africa. They basically measured the number of years in which livestock, estimated to be in a certain pixel, would not have sufficient feed in their pixel, and therefore would have to move to other pixels neighboring or further away in order to meet their needs. And so that, measuring the number of years in which, let's say, the animals in one pixel have to move, it's can be interpreted as a proxy for the likelihood of conflict, because if you have to move into somebody else's kind of a pixel, either in somebody else's grazing area or somebody else's farm, the chances for conflict increase. And what we found is that likely movement of animals actually increases considerably, in the future. And in fact, we looked at a couple of the scenarios of, let's say, quasi-climate change. So essentially, we picked a sequence of years in which there would be more drought than what we have observed in the last 20 years. And so that kind of likelihood of movement, therefore likelihood of conflict, increases considerably. What we also found is that let's say, proxy for possible conflict is actually mitigated when you adopt the technologies that I've described before. Now, clearly, again, this is a fairly kind of coarse analysis, kind of a zero-order approximation, and so on. Conflict has, while I think it's safe to say that this is a likely source of conflict, there are many more sources of conflict that we could not cover in the analysis. And so again, my main insight would be to say, let's focus on this one, but also it is important to do a much more kind of a country and some national specific analysis to address it properly.
Actually, in relation related to the question of Julius, may I also pose another side to this is the institutional aspect of land and land tenure and these issues, which of course, as you rightly said, the conflict and others. Have you looked at different tenure issues as it comes especially to pastoralists in the dry lands, particularly between them within themselves, but also between them and growing areas, and what came out of that?
Yeah, no, clearly that's a very, very important area. There is some discussion in the report, in the background papers on that, highlighting of course, the importance and the challenges. What I can observe, if I can I go back to one of the slides? So that's a little bit the kind of implicit, let's say, way to interpret. Let's see if I can get it here. I think it's here. This slide here, right? So, so essentially, the main message here is that in the absence of this intervention. So, if you look at the bar A, there's the red one and the beige one bars, right? So the share of pastoralists that are likely either to be pushed out or be vulnerable, it's very high, right? And these are, to me, are basically proxy for likely conflicts, because if they're going to be pushed out, where do they go? So either they encroach into somebody else's grazing area, or they go into and become poor people in urban areas. The share that are vulnerable are again, people that are basically at the fringes and are likely to be again, either being pushed towards migration or in any case being being forced to live in very precarious lives. So it is only when some of these challenges of let's say improved sharing and management of common areas, so bar D conservation of pasture or bar E reducing inequalities, only there that we can really make a significant difference and really kind of bring the share of population that are likely to be more resilient from 20% to 60% or more. So I think I agree with you. Unless these problems are tackled, we're not going to make a difference. That's the key message.
Thank you, Raffaello. We have another question from Simone Sala, who's asking actually a question related to the first question that I posed, and what are the possible contributions of technologies, especially in information and communication, and the advances that are made to strengthen the resilience at community level?
Well, I mean, I think I'm not an expert in this particular area, but I would think that probably there's a lot of opportunities for if you go back to that again part of the charts where a significant potential for reducing the vulnerability that can be seized by improved use of ICT. I mean, let's think about ways in which some of these technologies on crop varieties or drought resistant varieties and so on, the way in which this can be made more widely accessible, the ways in which can be calibrated to local conditions, and so on. These have to probably to rely on cheaper and more efficient ways to exchange information between, let's say, the farmers and the research community and so on. So we haven't looked at that aspect in detail, although you might find some discussion in the background papers. But I would totally agree that this is an important area for actually implementing some of the solutions.
Thank you very much for that, Raffaello. Now we have come actually to the end of our webinar, the first webinar that we have actually embarked upon. I would like to thank all the participants for taking the time to attend and for the interest in the topic. Good questions were raised, and I hope we'll continue the discussions, and this would have actually given us a good food for thought. As indicated earlier, this presentation has been recorded, and the link will be circulated to you all if you are registered in the informed mailing list. If you are not, send us an email to the address you see appearing in the chat box. That's already there, resilience@fao.org. Join us in our next webinar in 2 weeks' time. This is on Thursday, 9 June 2016. The topic will be on Resilience Index Measurement and Analysis Model, RIMA 2. What is new? We have seen RIMA 1. What is new in this one? And I think this will be a very interesting topic to follow up on Raffaello's discussion today. How do we measure resilience? I would like also to take this opportunity to thank again colleagues in DEFCO, DG DEFCO, as well as here in FAO, who actually assisted us technically and technologically to connect in this seamless way. Thank you to all. And finally, please make sure to give us your quick feedback through this quick survey below. You will have it. The link will be given, and it's already given now in the chat box. It will be good and please click in the right away and let's know your thoughts. Thank you all, and bye-bye.